Agrivoltaics, the combination of agriculture and solar. Agrivoltaics is this combination of technologies that comes together at the nexus of food, energy, water, and soil. I use the acronym the FUSE. And this combination of agriculture and solar really comes together to create synergy at multiple layers of the integrated system that can maximize yield in food, ag production, energy, water, and soil. And agrivoltaics is a vast field that's really been around since the early 2000s, but is fast advancing in both the research and development. But we now have hundreds and thousands of projects all over the United States and all over the world. And so we're going to go over some high level of agrivoltaics in this transmission, but at butterflypower.org/agrivoltaics, we have a whole section where you can take a deep dive and would really encourage investigation and a deeper understanding of how we can apply this within our own projects and our own communities and how we can participate in this wonderful market advancement. And so when we look at agrivoltaics, we can see that it has a very broad scale application across many different levels, going from rural to urban and from large farms and ranches, which are going to be more conducive to utility scale grid operations, all the way down to small farms and gardens that would be microgrids. And in this, we can integrate it with crops, grazing. We're going to look at bifacial solar fencing, orchard, berry, and vineyard operations can be integrated with greenhouses. And in the urban can be done in urban farms and rooftop operations. So the ability to integrate agrovoltaics in rural, urban adjacent, and urban area is really an untapped potential about how we can transform all aspects of our communities. And when we look at the agrivoltaic energy storage and EV microgrid market, what we can see is a synergistic solutions to core challenges between major sectors of ag, transportation, energy, and water. And this is really a multi-sector opportunity where we have a lot of very mature technology like solar and vast advancing technology in energy storage and electric vehicle and charging integration. And it's this combination of how it brings them together that makes such a elegant solution to these core challenges. Agrivoltaics, much like in permaculture, is all about stacking functions. And a lens to understand this is to really look at it from the multiple grids that agrivoltaics interacts with. So in energy at the power grid, what we can see is some key benefits. First of all, we can see a permanent reduction in energy expenses at the facility level. And this is huge because energy expenses are negatively correlated with higher energy cost when we're purchasing that energy from the market. And conversely, as we permanently remove those energy expenses, we become positively correlated with higher energy expenses. So higher energy expenses go, the better the investment in a local microgrid becomes. But this also applies to the ability to create long-term stable revenue from a solar PPA and a power purchase agreement, or the whole suite of energy storage services that can also produce revenue for grid energy storage and electric vehicle charging. And then also the ability to create revenue through renewable energy credits and the resiliency that comes with having localized generation and energy storage. In the agricultural grid, the ability to integrate multi-species rotational crop grazing, multi-species fruits, vegetables, and specialty like berries and vineyards. And when we have healthy plants and animals, we get improved fungi and microbial health. It can also support pollinators, native species, and forest health. And the ag grid can produce carbon credit revenue. The soil grid, agrovoltaics can improve soil health, increase organic matter, increase the amount of atmospheric carbon that's stored in the soil, increase the soil moisture, and can also produce carbon credit revenue. Inside of the water grid, we can see a massive reduction of water use and increased water conservation by the microclimate it creates through shading through solar panels. And we're also going to look at how you can integrate precision irrigation systems. When co-installed with solar, can not only massively decrease agriculture, which is our largest sector for consuming water, but how we can also use that exact same water to clean, cool, and increase the performance of the solar systems, which reduces down the cost of the solar system. And we can also increase water storage, which creates additional resiliency. And agrivoltaics can be used for stream, pond, and watershed restoration. So it's this stacking of functions that brings together to create these elegant solutions. Now, agrivoltaic storage systems, or AVSS, any type of solar panel can be used. But one of the most exciting area of developments is using bifacial solar panels. And bifacial solar panels are panels that let light come through and also have the ability to create power from both sides of the panels. And this is really unique when we're trying to optimize for plant growth. We have the ability to use multiple bifacial panel types, sizes, and there's varying transparency levels, how much light comes through versus how much power it produces, depending on how we're wanting to optimize a certain portion of the microgrid system. And we can use fixed solar systems that would be like BIPV, building integrated photovoltaics, in awnings, barns, corrals, covered parking, and other buildings at the farm facility, bifacial solar fence systems, and then also dual axis and single axis tracking systems. And the reality is, most projects can use multiple different approaches to really create an optimal producing system across all of the sectors. Now, NREL completed a seminal study about 18 months ago to assess what is the agrivoltaic market potential in the United States. And it's very exciting because what they found in this comprehensive study that's linked below, that if we converted just 1% of US farmland to agrivoltaics, in here they define 10.3 million acres, we can meet 100% of the renewable energy targets out to 2050. And that this would require an investment of $1.2 trillion in capital, which also represents huge investment opportunity into this market, and that over 35-year project life, it would pay for itself in 17 years. So I'd encourage looking at this whole study, and we're going to take a look at some of the high level aspects of it. But if we can meet 100% of the renewable energy targets for electricity with 1%, we're going to say, well, what if we converted 2, 3, 4? What if we converted 10% of our ag land to agrivoltaics? It creates an abundant and regenerative future. So, in order to understand how they're coming up with this, what are we trying to offset? And if we look in 2021 in the United States, total energy primary consumption and production was 97 quadrillion BTUs, or British thermal units. And of that, 36% is petroleum, 32% is natural gas, 8% is nuclear, 11% is coal, and 12% is renewable energy. So this is our existing mix by production. And then if we look, well, how is that consumed by the end use sector? In their major ones are transportation, industrial, residential, and commercial. And it's exciting to see how agrivoltaics can totally transform the current sector supported by electricity, but also how through the integration of electric vehicles, transportation is 90% powered by petroleum and only 1% through electricity. So, how we can radically transform our transportation sector through using agrivoltaic storage systems to being locally powered and locally produced, creating more resiliency, less emissions, and greater efficiency. So, when we look at the United States, its land coverage is 2.3 billion acres. And this comes from the Solar Future Study from the Department of Energy. This is a cool map that not only shows the US landmass, but also a color coding a lot of the crop types that we have in different areas. So in this Solar Future Study, we break down that 2.3 billion acres and say, well, we have 1.47 billion acres of ag land. Of that, 655 million is grassland and pasture, and 392 million acres is cropland. So, a little under half of all the land in the United States is already agricultural land. And this is a cool graphic on the right here that shows the 1% of the 1 billion acres of ag land is the 10.3 million acres. And it also shows you just graphically how small an amount of area that we need to convert. Now, that's what we're producing, where we're using it, and how much of a land we need, but how much do we have to work with? And in this same Solar Future Studies, they looked at all of the renewable energy resource abundance we have in the United States. And it's really quite amazing. looking at solar, wind, geothermal, hydropower, and some tidal energy, we have 463,000 terawatt hours of energy available in the United States every year. Currently, in the electrical system, the United States uses 4,000 terawatts of electricity. So we have 100x, 100,000 or 100 times the amount of energy available that we're currently consuming. And we're currently accessing 0.2% of that available energy. So we have such a massive amount of abundance that is distributed in this very unique and beautiful way across all of the United States landmass. Now, to try and understand, well, how are we going to meet those renewable energy targets means how does the grid need to transform? And in the Solar Future study, they look at the grid today, which is primarily powered by fossil fuels, and then converting it to two basic scenarios, a decarbonized grid and then what's called the decarb plus E scenario, or high electrification. And so we begin integrating more solar, but by 2035, but to reach a fully decarbonized grid, which has no more fossil fuels, the mix would be 45% solar, 44% wind, 4% nuclear, 4% hydropower, 2% hydrogen, a little bit of biopower and geothermal. And this is in buildings, industry, and transportation. So let's zoom in on solar, that 45%. And in order to produce that, the predominance would come from utility scale PV. And their modeling would need 297,000 terawatt hours, which is 300 million gigawatt hours. And then you'll see this all others at the bottom. If we zoom into that, it also has 1,100 terawatt hours or 1.1 million gigawatt hours of distributed PV. So when we talk about utility scale and microgrid, this is how they're showing meet the demand primarily through utility scale. And well, this is a good estimate. I think we could have a lot more from distributed PV, but regardless, this is the method that they're approaching. So when we look at a solar radiation map of the United States, and it's called the direct normal solar radiation power resources, this would be the average over a year. And it's really interesting to look at the United States and say, oh, how abundant it is, but geographically it's different. Now, all of the United States has an abundance of resources. And to kind of put this into context, I always use the example of Germany, which about a decade ago was the global solar leader. Germany sits at a much higher level in the Northern Hemisphere in the United States. It's basically on the same longitude as Alaska. So they were the global solar leader with a lot less solar resources. So the US has an abundance in total, but particularly in an area where we're facing some of these structural challenges, particularly in agriculture in the West and the Southwest, it's very abundant on average. But if we look at the same map in December, we can see the decline because we get less solar in the winter, but the Southwest and the West is still very abundant. And then if we look in June in the middle of summer, we can see the huge amount that's flowing through seasonally across the United States. So that 45% PV in the high electrification scenario is also modeling in the future demand. So we're currently using about 4,000 terawatt hours. By 2035, we're going to need an additional 1,000 terawatt hours to 5,000, and then 6,700 terawatt hours by 2050. So we're showing a 40% demand increase for population growth, all of the things that we use electrical power for that we're just creating more for, and also the integration of a huge amount of electric vehicles into the grid system. And that's on average a 1.9% annual increase. So this model takes into really a comprehensive look at the growth that we're going to need. Now, it also means from generation, we also need to shift the grid power capacity. So currently our power capacity is held by having coal and natural gas plants running continuously. But by 2035, we need to integrate about 400 gigawatts of energy storage. And energy storage is vital to allow us to harness the intermittent resources of solar and wind. But it's also creating a massive efficiency in the system because the way the grid operates, we have to provide a lot of top end power that we only use very infrequently. And we have to maintain a huge baseline that we're never really utilizing because you can't just turn off a natural gas plant or a coal plant very easily. And then by 2050, we need to integrate 1,500 gigawatts of energy storage. And so this massive increase in transformation energy capacity is one of the critical opportunities in the agrivoltaic storage market for that to happen in a decentralized and distributed fashion. Now, another key part of this is the utility level. And we'll look at investor-owned utilities, the private um, sector of our electrical grid, but it's really electric cooperatives that hold one of the great opportunities because electric cooperatives are local energy and technology partners within communities that are really member based. And currently, cooperatives power most of the nation's land mass, 56%, serving 42 million people, including 92% of the persistent poverty counties. So, areas that are economically challenged, co ops are already serving most of them. They power 21 million businesses, homes, schools, and farms. And because not, cooperatives are nonprofits, they return more than 1.5 billion in capital credits to their consumer members in 2020. So, being built for and by the members and also reflecting the values of those communities is a really unique opportunity. And this information comes from the NRECA, a cooperative association here in the United States. And to look at the priorities of the cooperatives, how they're perfectly aligned to integrate agrivoltaic storage and EV networks. And what their focuses are is to develop rural microgrids, advance the electric vehicle charging networks, expand rural broadband access. So as we're bringing more power, we can bring high-speed internet and communications, promote clean energy research, development, deployment, and also continuing to enhance grid resiliency and modernization efforts. And so while cooperatives hold a huge key to this solution today, it's also the rich history of cooperatives. And rural cooperatives totally transformed the United States very quickly. And if you look in 1935, 9 out of 10 rural homes didn't have any electrical service. Just 3 years later, 350 cooperatives in 45 states were delivering electricity to 1.5 million farms. And this is really from President Roosevelt signing an executive order bringing the Rural Electrification Administration into existence. And this was part of a much larger Rebuild America plan, but it's also because the investor-owned utilities were not interested in the economic model to really build for sparsely populated rural areas. And we still, in some ways, face this challenge today. So there's a cool video here from the NRECA website that just shows the rapid growth of how quickly from 1935 we began to build rural electric cooperatives. And when you think about the speed of pulling wires and building new generation that did this quickly, now when we really apply that same ability to move quickly with cooperatives today, when we already have all that transmission, but now needing to rebuild new generation and integrate storage and electric vehicle operations at the rural level, it's a very nimble and adaptive system. So the REA by 1953 was powering more than 90% of US farms. So cooperatives are a huge part, and they have this wonderful video on the website that's just so inspiring of what's happened in the past, but also does such a great job of communicating how cooperatives are one of these key solutions to our regenerative future.
Imagine, if you will, what it must have been like after dark in the farms, ranches, and small towns of America 75 years ago. Before there was power. Before there was electricity. But that was all about to change, and change it did when farmers, ranchers, and rural families banded together to shine a light on the need to turn the lights on in rural America. Cooperation created the electric co-ops, and the co-ops created a movement so profound that President Franklin Roosevelt said, "The forward march of electric cooperatives has an even more profound significance in terms of our fight to preserve democracy." Is there any finer representation of democracy at work than neighbors helping neighbors? When the electric co-ops were born, something much bigger happened. For when we turn the lights on, we help democratize the American dream for the people, families, farms, ranches, and businesses of rural America. The effect was so powerful that in 1940, a man sitting in a pew in a small rural church in Tennessee was moved to say, "Brothers and sisters, I want to tell you two things. The greatest thing in the world is to have God in your heart, and the next greatest thing on earth is to have electricity in your home." 75 years ago, a handful of farmers and ranchers, united by the common values of honesty, responsibility, equality, and solidarity, and armed only with a powerful purpose, took the lead, banded together, and answered the call. Today, a new generation of electric co-op members, just like the farmers, ranchers, and rural families did 75 years ago, must again answer the call. We are the owners of the co-ops and are the fabric of the communities in which we live and work. And as faith and trust in other institutions sink, the need to empower, inspire, and mobilize each other to take care of ourselves, our neighbors, and our communities rises. Let it be known, it is time for this new generation to turn the lights on again, to power, protect, and grow our communities, not just with the electricity of our infrastructure, but with the electricity of our purpose, passion, ideas, and will, to ensure that the quality of life in all of the communities in which we live and work is improved. For our purpose is a mighty one, to power communities and empower members to improve the quality of their lives. And when we live up to our purpose, we relight the American dream. Think back now about the profound impact our founding members made 3/4 of a century ago and grab hold of that same spirit, because we are the electric cooperative members of tomorrow, and our work has just begun.
So, this super inspiring perspective of the history of cooperatives. But if we apply that to where the United States today, through the lens of where is existing solar generation happening? So, this is from the EIA, and it shows the percentage of solar generation as a part of each state. And so, if we look at it, we can see a really unique opportunity happening in the Rocky Mountains. And in this, we're going from the macro to micro and focusing on this 7-state regional market. And if you look at Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Idaho, and Wyoming, you can see that in these 7 states, that's 49% of all of the solar generation as a percentage of total generation in the United States. And then just one cooperative that's made up of 6 member cooperatives, Deseret Power, touches each one of these states. And so when we talk about the power of the cooperatives to be a reflection of each of these communities, but also that working with cooperatives, they go across some of the state borders, and they're this opportunity to innovate that can touch multiple different communities. So it's a very exciting thing to think about cooperatives and how we can utilize the power of our communities and our cooperative power to create the regenerative future. Thank you for taking the time to view this section of the United States Agrivoltaic Energy Storage and EV Microgrid Market Intelligence Analysis. Really deeply hope that you've found this really valuable and hopefully inspiring. And if you're not watching the entire section on butterflypower.org, really encourage you to come and see all sections to get the totality of this amazing opportunity. And regardless of what channel you're finding this transmission, would be deeply appreciated if you give it some love, give it a like, and share it with a farmer or a rancher or anyone who's interested in participating in the regenerative transformation our economy, our energy sector, and our environment. Any investors who are looking at an amazing opportunity to transform their capital into the regenerative future. And it's just a deep honor and blessing to be here in this time and to participate in this great work. And we are the butterfly generation. It's time to rise and shine, time to transform and fly.